In the stillness between midnight and dawn, where shadows stretch longer and the silence breathes a little louder, mysteries stir. Forgotten towns whisper your name. Time slips, vanishings and strange visitors linger just beyond the veil of understanding. These aren't tales meant to comfort. They're questions that ache for answers. From eerie disappearances to relics that defy logic, tonight we journey into the cracks of reality where explanations fall short and only wonder remains. So turn down the lights, lean in close, and let your imagination guide you. Because once you start down this path, there's no turning back. Like and subscribe if you're ready to uncover the unknown. Welcome to HP Unsolved Mysteries. If this story sparks your deepest curiosity, tonight we step softly into snow-drifted silence, toward a place where even footprints dared not linger. You're trudging through the crisp Arctic cold, breath rising like ghostly ribbons. All around, the land stretches wide and white, but ahead something feels off. The outline of snow-covered structures, but no movement, no smoke from chimneys, no barking sled dogs, just a village swallowed by a haunting stillness. This is the tale of the Lake Unjikuni mystery, one of the oldest and coldest cases in North American lore. The year is 1930. A fur trapper named Joe LaBelle arrives at the Inuit village near the lake's edge, a place he's visited many times before. But this time, no one greets him, no children laugh, no elders wave from the shadows of their tents. He explores, unease growing with each step. Meals sit uneaten. Firewood is stacked neatly. The kayaks are tied in place. But the people, gone, all of them. You poke your head into a hut. Blankets folded, tools in place. It's like they meant to come back. And then the dogs, sled teams found frozen to death in their harnesses. A detail so chilling it's hard to forget. And if that weren't enough, the nearby graves had been unearthed, not by animals, carefully, deliberately. Historians still argue whether this ever truly happened. Some claim the story was sensationalized, others think LaBelle misidentified the village. But even skeptics admit something occurred. Canadian Mounties were called. An official report was filed. Then, silence. Here's your quirky fact for the night. Some claim the village was taken by a skyship, a legend rooted in ancient Inuit lore. In some retellings, bright lights were seen above the lake before the disappearance. Sound familiar? That hum just beyond hearing, that glow on the horizon you try to explain away. Skeptics, of course, jump to logical theories, mass migration, starvation. But LaBelle said the food stocks were full, clothes remained, and why dig up the dead? Now imagine you're standing in that village square, surrounded by snow, hearing nothing but the crunch of your own boots. Would you feel alone or watched? It's like the snow itself holds its breath. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me, where are you listening from? And what time is it in your corner of the world? Midnight in Montana? Dawn in Tokyo? Drop it in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You zip up your coat. The wind tugs at your hood, and behind you, was that a whisper? Just the wind? Probably. But remember, the Inuit say the land remembers everything. You just have to know where to listen. You shift uneasily, the snow from the Unjikuni memory still clinging to your boots, but the chill in the air now carries desert dust. The terrain changes, the silence remains. You're standing in the blistering sun of New Mexico. Sand crunches underfoot. The wind smells like copper and ozone. Before you, the remnants of a ranch scarred by phenomena, scorched patches of earth, fencing twisted like pretzels, and a few oddly calm cows that seemed just a little too still. Welcome to Skinwalker Ranch, one of the strangest slices of real estate in the American West. You've probably heard whispers of it, shadowy government programs, glowing orbs, and creatures that don't belong on this side of the food chain. But step closer. You're here now. Back in the mid-1990s, the Sherman family bought this ranch near Ballard, Utah, eager to start a peaceful cattle operation. What they got instead was pure X-Files. Glowing eyes watching from the tree line, tools vanishing and reappearing, cattle found surgically mutilated, no blood, no tracks. One night, Terry Sherman shot a massive wolf-like creature that was attacking a calf. Point blank. It didn't flinch, just stared, then trotted off into the woods and disappeared. The Shermans, understandably rattled, sold the ranch. Enter billionaire Robert Bigelow, founder of the National Institute for Discovery Science, NIDS, and later, yes, the Pentagon. They installed cameras, motion sensors, and scientists. The result? Even more questions. Devices would stop working the moment something appeared. Phenomena refused to be recorded. Your mainstream historical fact? The U.S. Department of Defense actually funded a program here, AEW SAP, Advanced Aerospace Weapon System Applications Program. It sounds like sci-fi, but it's in the paperwork. And their conclusion? The phenomena defy known physics. Now here's your fringe tidbit. Infrared footage reportedly captured a spiraling vortex, what one physicist called a hole in the sky. Through it, they saw a creature crawling out. It sounds absurd until you realize this scientist still refuses to publicly deny it. Why? Because the footage is gone. Historians still argue whether Skinwalker Ranch is a true paranormal hotspot or a masterclass in confirmation bias and suggestion. Maybe both. But that doesn't explain how radiation levels spiked without warning, or why even hardened researchers refuse to return. Locals speak of skinwalkers, shape-shifting beings from Navajo legend said to wear animal hides and control dark forces. Skeptical? Of course. But remember, myths are often memories with frayed edges. Imagine camping there. One night you hear footsteps. No lights, just movement. You flick on your flashlight and nothing. But the wind shifts, and suddenly there's a voice, close to your ear, whispering a word you don't recognize. The desert goes quiet again. This place doesn't want to be studied. That's the overwhelming impression, as if it reacts to attention, like a performer that hates the stage. The more you record, the less you find. But the moment you drop your guard, boom, the ranch responds, so you tuck your journal away. You glance at the cattle, still not blinking, still too still, and behind you a black shape darts between the sagebrush. You blink, gone. That's the problem with Skinwalker Ranch. Every thread you pull tightens a different knot. Every answer births 3 new riddles. Maybe the land itself is alive, or maybe it's a wound in reality. But tonight it sleeps, for now. Now the desert sand softens under your feet, morphing into dustier gravel. The horizon ripples like a mirage, except this time, the glitch isn't in your eyes. You've arrived at Mexico's zone of silence, and everything, radio, GPS, even the wind, refuses to work properly. You check your phone, no signal. Your compass spins slowly like it's been hypnotized. The sky above seems clear but heavy. Something about this place presses down, not with force, but with presence. It's the kind of silence that feels intentional. Stretching across the Mapimi Basin in northern Mexico, the zone of silence, La Zona del Silencio, earned its name from the strange phenomena reported since the 1930s. Most notably, radio waves and communication signals just stop working. No rhyme, no reason, just dead air. In 1970, a U.S. military test rocket misfired and crash-landed here, prompting unexpected attention. The cleanup crew expected a routine recovery, but what they found instead was a region full of magnetic anomalies, strange vegetation mutations, and a pattern of electronics failure. To this day, tourists report watches stopping, drones dropping, and phones freezing. All at once, all without warning. And just when you think it's coincidence, the odd visitors start appearing. Locals share chilling tales of tall, blonde strangers, pale-skinned, blue-eyed individuals dressed in outdated clothes. They speak perfect Spanish, ask for water, smile politely, and vanish. No one has ever seen them arrive or leave, but they show up, often just before something goes wrong. Want a mainstream fact? This area does have high levels of iron and uranium deposits, which could cause minor magnetic interference. But that wouldn't explain why even government satellites have flagged the area as a distortion point. Now for your fringe tidbit. Some claim that the zone aligns along the same latitude as the Bermuda Triangle and the pyramids of Giza. It's a wild theory, of course, but oddly persistent. Ancient alien enthusiasts light up over this one, insisting that this paranormal latitude is a ley line humming with unseen energy. Historians still argue whether these connections are meaningful or pure pattern-seeking from bored human brains. Still, this place feels off. Plants grow in spirals. Meteorites crash here more frequently than in surrounding areas. There's a heavy, baked-in strangeness to the land, as if something beneath the soil watches you from below. A researcher once described walking through the zone and spotting a small fireball hovering in the distance. It moved like it was alive. He followed it for half a mile, then it zipped upward and disappeared. Later, his boots were magnetized. He couldn't explain why. You wander farther into the scrublands, the air growing warmer but not more comfortable. A crow circles overhead, then abruptly changes direction and disappears beyond the horizon. Your ears ring faintly, not from sound but from lack of it. At this point, your logic starts to fray. You know some of this could be explained by natural magnetism or strange soil chemistry, but not the figures who leave no footprints, not the lights that hover in intelligent silence. Not the dreams people report after visiting, repeating shared dreams of an ancient stone obelisk buried just beneath the surface. You don't even realize your feet have stopped moving until you see the dust settle in front of your boots. The land doesn't want you any deeper. You can feel it, and yet you still stare toward the horizon where a shimmer of heat distorts the shape of something tall, something unmoving, half buried in the haze. A tower, a monument, or maybe just another mirage. Either way, the zone waits and watches. You turn to leave, but the silence walks with you. You breathe easier once you're out of the desert. The buzzing in your head fades, but you're not safer, not yet. The next step of this journey takes you somewhere older, somewhere sacred, in a way that has nothing to do with temples and everything to do with the air that shifts wrong around the edges. You've arrived at Hoia Baciu Forest, Romania. They call it the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania, but that doesn't quite capture it. This forest isn't chaotic, it's intentional. Trees grow in spirals, limbs curve where no light bends. There's a perfectly circular clearing at the heart of it, where nothing grows, not a weed, not moss, just dry soil and quiet. Locals say don't go in after dark. Some say don't go in at all. But you're here, and already the light feels uncertain. The first modern incident occurred in 1968, when a military technician named Emil Barnea photographed a silver disc floating above the forest canopy. The photos were analyzed, deemed legitimate, not doctored. He lost his job anyway. because this forest doesn't like attention. Historians still argue whether the photos showed a UFO or an optical illusion. But that didn't stop others. Paranormal researchers, curiosity seekers, bored vloggers, they all came, and many left changed. Some report burn marks on their skin, unexplained nausea or overwhelming dread. Some walk in and return hours later, unaware they were even gone. One girl vanished for 5 years, reappeared, same clothes, no aging, no memory. That's a little harder to brush off. The forest has been the site of seances, occult rituals, and scientific expeditions. Nothing explains what happens here, but sensors often detect sudden radiation spikes, brief bursts of energy like someone's flipping a switch. One researcher said it felt like the forest had a pulse, and it didn't match his own. Mainstream scientists chalk it up to unusual geomagnetic patterns in the area, possibly caused by subterranean mineral structures. But that doesn't explain the voices. Oh yes, voices. Dozens have reported hearing whispers just behind their shoulder. Never clear, always just at the edge of understanding. Some insist they were called by name. One man ran screaming from the woods, claiming he saw his childhood self curled at the base of a tree, weeping. It's not just the clearing or the twisted trees, it's the surveillance, the sense that the forest itself is sentient, that it doesn't trap you, it learns from you, watches you, replicates you. Want a quirky tidbit? There's an old Transylvanian legend that says this forest sits on a doorway between worlds. Not quite hell, not quite heaven, just the wrong side of something. A kind of earth bruise, as one folklorist put it. A place where reality thins and bleeds. Researchers have even tried to map the anomalies. Temperature dips, compass spins, unnatural fog, and they all center around that barren clearing. No growth, no wildlife, just dirt. One drone operator lost control of their machine as soon as it passed the clearing's edge. The drone turned, dropped, and was never found. And now you're standing on the edge of that same circle. The wind is still, birds gone. Your breath echoes louder than it should. You know better. You know not to step forward, but you do. The soil beneath your feet is dry, loose, yet somehow damp with memory. You think you hear something, but it's behind you, even when you spin. There's no motion, only waiting. You close your eyes just for a second. When you open them, the shadows have shifted. You are not alone. And somehow you know you've never been alone here. Your heartbeat still hasn't steadied when you leave the forest. But where you're going now, no trees, no mist, just snow, ice, silence that swallows the sound of your own boots. You're standing at the edge of the Arctic tundra, gazing across a frozen void toward a place no one dares mark on modern maps. This is Lake Anjikuni, Canada, site of one of the most chilling disappearances in North American folklore. Not a person, not a group, an entire village. You heard that right. The year was 1930. A Canadian fur trapper named Joe LaBelle approached the Inuit village of Anjikuni on foot, exhausted and seeking shelter. He'd been there before. It was a reliable stop. Dozens of residents, warm fires, shared stories. This time, the smoke was gone. What he found was worse than silence. Empty huts, cold fires, meals half-cooked, dog sleds left unattended. And the dogs, still harnessed, dead, starved, some half-buried in snow. LaBelle ran, stumbled back through the forest to raise the alarm. Authorities arrived days later and confirmed the impossible. The entire population, estimated around 30 men, women, and children, was simply gone. No signs of violence, no blood, no tracks leading away. Just one detail that made investigators pause. The graves were open, not vandalized, not destroyed, opened, as if something or someone had taken the bodies with surgical care. Historians still argue whether this ever actually happened. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police officially denied the event, stating it was fabricated or exaggerated. But records suggest there was a search, and if it was a hoax, it was a detailed one, right down to the eerie radio logs and a second trapper's testimony, claiming to see strange lights dancing above the lake the night before. A fringe theory suggests the villagers were taken by beings from above, a UFO abduction long before those stories hit the mainstream. Another posits a temporal slip, a rift in reality that simply absorbed the town like a breath into the wind. Want a quirky twist? Inuit oral tradition already includes stories of sky spirits, tall beings who descend during aurora events, silent and bright. Some call them tornit, tricksters that dwell in the north and steal people when the sky glows green. But skeptics argue weather conditions, blizzards, snow blindness, carbon monoxide leaks, could have driven the villagers into confusion, causing them to flee. One problem, their clothes were still in the homes. No one fled barefoot into the Arctic willingly. And then there's the timing. This was just one of several disappearances around the Arctic reported in the 1920s and 30s. A trapper's entire family missing. A lighthouse crew gone without a trace. A radio outpost that stopped transmitting. All chalked up to weather, isolation, madness. But taken together, there's a pattern. You start to notice the cold feels wrong. It's not just physical, it's quiet. Your own breathing sounds muffled, like you're not alone on the ice, even if no one is with you. Maybe that's the most terrifying part of true disappearance. Not that people vanish, but that the world seems totally fine with it. No shockwaves, no headlines, just erasure. You're walking along the lake now. Moonlight glitters on the surface, frozen solid, and just beneath the ice, you swear you see something. A shadow. No. It's the shape of a sled, tipped sideways just below the surface. The outline of something once real, now entombed. A piece of history no one's willing to explain. The air is sharp. The sky glows faintly green. You hear something, not wind, not your own feet, but a low hum, faint and circular, and then silence again. Welcome to the north. Nothing stays, not even you. The frost hasn't left your fingertips, but the silence is different now. Warmer, yet far stranger. You find yourself in the desert of northern Mexico, staring out over a parched, cracked plain. It looks empty, deceptively so. But here the air itself betrays you. You've entered the zone of silence, or as locals call it, La Zona del Silencio. A mysterious stretch of land in the Mapimi Desert where radios fail, compasses spin, and electronics refuse to work. If you're thinking, that sounds familiar, you're not wrong. It shares the same latitude as the Bermuda Triangle and the Great Pyramid of Giza. Coincidence? You've been on this journey long enough to know better. Here's how the story usually begins. Someone passes through the zone with a truck, and suddenly the radio dies. Not with static, just silence. GPS cuts out. Sometimes the engine stutters. Sometimes the clocks stop. And then, something appears. Bright lights streak across the sky. Fireballs. Not meteors exactly, but controlled objects, vanishing without a trace. Sometimes strangers show up. Tall, pale figures in white suits, speaking fluent Spanish, impossibly polite, and always disappearing the moment you look away. Fringe researchers believe this region houses a magnetic vortex, a sort of cosmic traffic jam where energy pools and dimensional membranes thin. That's one explanation. Others say it's the result of ancient meteors, like the one that struck the desert in the 1960s, which only intensified the strange behavior of the zone. Historians still argue whether these stories are exaggerated, fueled by tourism and fantasy, or if there's a deeper truth buried beneath the desert sand. After all, many government surveys and expeditions here never publish results. Some never even return. Want a quirky fact? Locals claim animals avoid certain paths. Goats stop, birds veer away, even insects reroute. One rancher insists his cows refuse to cross an invisible wall near a ridge that glows faintly under moonlight. And get this, NASA once lost a test missile that went wildly off course, only to land right in the middle of the zone. The US government swooped in, conducted a quiet recovery, and never explained how a missile designed to fly thousands of miles missed its mark by hundreds and hit one of the most electromagnetically unstable areas on Earth. Coincidence? You're walking now, the desert wind brushing against your face, the air unnaturally still. The sand crunches softly under your boots. You see shapes in the distance. Rocks? Sculptures? No, satellite dishes, abandoned, half-buried, pointing at nothing, listening to silence. And in that silence, your own thoughts echo too loudly. What if the zone doesn't block signals? It records them, stores memories in electromagnetic layers. Like a cosmic hard drive, every transmission, every footstep, every thought lingering just beneath the soil. Some theorists say these places are leak points, where reality thins and consciousness can drift. That's why so many people here report strange dreams, time loops, visions of places they've never seen, or worse, visions of themselves walking a few feet behind. You turn to check, no one there. Still, the sensation doesn't leave. It wraps around your spine like an idea you can't forget. Like you're being monitored, not by cameras or satellites, but by the place itself. A town nearby is said to vanish and reappear depending on who's looking. Tourists never find it twice. Some return home with photographs that change over time. Buildings fade, people's faces blur, signage no longer matches the local language. One hiker swears the road she took in wasn't there when she came back. And then there are the lights. You're watching the sky now. No clouds, no stars, just a single glowing orb, hovering, not falling, not flying, just there, observing. You don't feel scared exactly, you feel studied. The zone of silence doesn't just block noise, it amplifies wonder, forces you to ask questions you thought were beneath you. Like, what if reality isn't broken here? It's just running at a different frequency. You exhale and the sound vanishes. This desert has swallowed more than signals. It's swallowed certainty. You're still shaking desert dust from your boots when the forest rises again. This time darker, thicker, and stitched with fog so dense it muffles your very thoughts. The world smells of peat and pine, but something beneath it, older, earthier, lurks. This is the Bennington Triangle, nestled in Vermont's Green Mountains. Between 1945 and 1950, this serene patch of American wilderness became the stage for 5 unexplained disappearances, each one stranger than the last. No crime scenes, no bodies, not even tracks, just people gone. You'd expect some backwoods legend or cryptid lore to spice things up, and you wouldn't be wrong. Local tales mention a man-eating stone, hidden somewhere deep in the woods. Supposedly, it opens to swallow the unlucky whole. Sounds ridiculous, right? But then you realize every person vanished within the same few-mile radius, and none of them were ever seen again. The first case is easy to dismiss. A hunter, seasoned and solitary, never returned. But then came Mitty Rivers, a guide who vanished on a well-known trail during a hike he'd done dozens of times. They found his cartridge belt. Nothing else. You don't just misplace a grown man in open forest. Then came Paula Weldon, an 18-year-old college student who set off in a bright red coat and never returned. Hundreds searched. Even the FBI got involved. Nothing. Not a shoe. Not a scrap. One witness claimed to have seen her turn off the trail, then dissolve into the trees. Historians still argue whether these events are connected by foul play, coincidence, or something more surreal. The lack of any physical evidence, combined with the time gap between cases, leaves theories floating like autumn leaves. Serial killer? Hidden sinkholes? Portal? Let's add something fringe. One man's scent trail ended abruptly. Dogs followed it right to a rock, and then it stopped, like he was plucked into the air. Another woman vanished right in front of a busload of people. She was there. She walked ahead. She was gone. Even weirder, people who hike these trails today report strange whispers, like their name being called. Some turn around to find no one. Others claim the trails change, forks that weren't there before. One hiker got turned around so completely, he walked in circles for 16 hours, only to end up where he started, with no recollection of time passing. And just like in the zone of silence, electronics fail here. Compasses spin uselessly. GPS glitches. One camper described waking up 30 feet away from where he fell asleep, tent still zipped. No sign of disturbance. Want a quirky detail? Locals refuse to enter the woods after dark. Some say the forest breathes differently past sunset, that the birds stop, that something not quite animal walks the trails, too tall, too quiet, not hunting, just watching. You trudge further in, and the fog thickens. Your flashlight flickers, not from battery, but something magnetic? You feel like you've looped the same path 3 times, even though the trail beneath your feet looks new. The trees lean oddly, as if pointing toward something. Or away. Bennington isn't just haunted, it's patient. These forests may not roar like Skinwalker Ranch or pulse like the Devil's Sea, but their silence is louder, their mystery is colder, and their grip? It doesn't need claws. A fringe theory here suggests the Bennington Triangle is one of the thin places, zones where our world overlaps with another. The Celts believed such areas existed at crossroads, caves, or forests where time unwinds and spirits walk freely. Modern thinkers whisper about time folds and unseen dimensions, where a wrong step places you elsewhere. Not dead, just misplaced. One missing man was a survival expert. If anyone should have found his way back, it was him. Instead, only his last fire pit remained, still warm. The woods swallowed the rest. You pause now. Did the trail just shift behind you? You're not paranoid. You're aware. These aren't just ghost stories. They're reminders that for all our maps, for all our satellites, there are still blank spots. And some of them have teeth. Your breath fogs in the cool air, but you don't shiver. Not from cold, at least. The woods are too quiet. And the silence? It's watching. The mist clings to your jacket like a second skin as you leave the forest behind, but not the unease. That sensation, like reality, is just a sheet of paper, and someone's curling up the corner to peek in. You breathe in deep. Seawater. Salt, and something older still, metallic like rusted chains left too long underwater. You've entered the Devil's Sea, also called the Dragon's Triangle. It lies east of Japan, in the Pacific Ocean, an expanse of water so treacherous and mysterious it's earned comparison to the Bermuda Triangle. You're on deck now, sailing into one of Earth's most dangerous maritime zones. You glance down at your compass. It spins like it's drunk. The crew doesn't panic. They're used to this. At least, they pretend to be. Let's anchor in some history. In 1952, the Japanese government declared this region hazardous after the disappearance of 5 military vessels, all with over 700 crew members combined. No distress calls, no wreckage, just gone. They dispatched a research ship, the Kayo Maru no 5, to investigate. It vanished too. Historians still argue whether these events were the result of undersea volcanoes, which are indeed common here. But scientists were never able to confirm that explanation. The water samples came back normal. The sonar scans blurred, as if the ocean refused to show its hand. There are ghost islands here, reported land masses that appear on maps for years, even centuries, only to be revealed as mirages or errors, or to vanish entirely mid-sighting. One fisherman swears he docked on a rocky islet, spent the night, and awoke to open water. His anchor was still wet. Of course, legends swirl like the currents themselves. Japanese folklore says dragons live beneath the waves here. Serpents, some say. Portals, say others. In one tale, an entire fishing fleet sailed into a morning fog and never came out. One quirky thread? The Devil's Sea sits almost directly opposite the Bermuda Triangle, both roughly on the same 35th latitude. Coincidence or cosmic symmetry? Now you might say, okay, but sea monsters? Come on. Fair. But then you learn that pilots have reported seeing ships hovering above the water, distorted and shimmering like holograms, then vanishing with no radar record. And you wonder, let's talk anomalies. Electronics regularly fail here. Radios go dead. GPS maps redraw themselves mid-course. You're sailing due east, then suddenly find yourself off course by 40 miles, with no memory of turning. Some ships log missing time. A 20-hour journey completed in 6. The logs don't match the engine output. Clocks go haywire. And yes, like the Bermuda Triangle, there are strange lights. Glowing green spheres that dive into the water. Pulses of energy that rise from the seafloor like a heartbeat. In 1980, a Chinese trawler recorded a column of mist rising vertically from the sea. It didn't move, just hovered. Then a sudden burst of heat hit their instruments. When they passed through it, 2 crew members collapsed from nausea and confusion. No toxins, no explanation, just trauma. Fringe researchers call the Devil's Sea a marine liminal zone. Not just a place of mystery, but of passage. A threshold where the veil between dimensions thins. They believe these waters may contain time wells, not holes, but ripples. Places where cause and effect lose their grip. You've heard about these before, haven't you? At Bennington, at Skinwalker, the pattern forms like a constellation of unknowns stitched into Earth's skin. The government? Oh, they've looked. Quietly. Japan canceled official research trips decades ago. Unofficially, there are rumors of naval sonar anomalies that cannot be explained. Massive objects moving at impossible speeds below the surface. Too large to be whales. Too deep for submarines. Want something closer to the weird? A sailor named Hiro Tanaka once returned from the Triangle raving about a city beneath the water. Towers, arches, something glowing blue at its heart. His boat was intact. His mind, less so. He spent the rest of his life painting what he saw. His final work? A storm of lights pulling a ship into the sky. You stand now at the ship's bow, wind cutting your cheeks, watching the horizon shimmer. Your radio crackles. Static, then your own voice, whispering back your last sentence. The crew says it's just feedback, but they don't look convinced. A final theory. What if the Triangle isn't dangerous, but defensive? A kind of border patrol for something we're not meant to reach. The sea isn't killing, it's protecting. What's down there isn't lost, it's hidden. The sun dips low, the sky stains orange, then bruises into violet. You feel the hum again, not in the air but in your bones. You glance at the sea, it stares back. You wake from uneasy dreams, still aboard, still breathing, but the ocean is gone. Not literally, of course, it's still there, lapping softly against the hull. But something has changed. The air feels older. The sky looks static, like someone painted it on glass. You rub your eyes and look again. Yep, still weird. Time to step back on land, or what's left of it. You're in Suderland, Iceland, where ancient lava fields stretch across the land like the skin of some sleeping beast. A place that's not just old, it's volcanic, jagged, and almost alive in how it swallows light and memory. This region is famous for more than its beauty. It eats time. Hikers report strange phenomena here. Hours passing in what feels like minutes. GPS systems spinning wildly. Digital watches freezing and then fast-forwarding. One trekker claimed to have walked in circles for 24 hours. When rescue teams found him, his footprints showed he had only moved 300 meters. He was dehydrated, babbling about voices and flickering lights beneath the ground. Mainstream geologists cite strong magnetic fields and iron-rich lava as explanations. Fair enough, but hikers don't usually hallucinate whole cities under the rock, do they? Fringe stories go further. Some say there are entrances to the hollow earth beneath these rocks. Others believe the land holds ancient machinery, Atlantean tech buried before the ice came. And then there are tales of a massive stone door, sealed tight, with symbols that glow only during solar eclipses. Historians still argue whether Iceland's lava regions should be treated purely as natural geology or something more, say it with me, ritualistic. Archaeologists have found small stone circles, altars, even signs of cremation. But no tools, no weapons, just presence. Now imagine you're walking across this landscape, your feet crunching volcanic gravel. A strange vibration builds in the soles of your boots. Your map says you're here, but your compass disagrees. You look up, and the fog rolls in like a curtain. Visibility drops to a few feet. You slow your pace, and then a shadow moves. But there's no wind. This is the place locals whisper about, but avoid after dark. They believe it doesn't belong to Iceland, not fully. That it belongs to something older, something that was here before people, before even the ice. One elderly villager told a documentary crew, "When the ground hums, don't move. That's when they notice you." He didn't explain who they were, but his dog wouldn't go near the edge of the lava field, just whined, turned, and ran. Still skeptical? Consider the Patursson Rift, an actual geological crack where tourists have filmed odd blue lights rising like reverse lightning. Official reports called it bioluminescent gas. Sure, if that gas can hover 10 feet in the air, take a sharp left turn, and vanish. And here's your quirky fact of the day. Iceland is also home to one of the highest densities of people who believe in Huldufolk, the hidden people, elves if you like, entities that live in the rocks, avoid roads, and only show themselves if deeply offended or deeply curious. Sometimes you wonder, are these myths or warnings wrapped in rhyme? A researcher once set up a multi-sensor camera rig here. Thermal, night vision, EMF detectors, you name it. Everything functioned until 2:13 a.m., when all devices shut off simultaneously. When they came back online 4 minutes later, the footage was gone. Not corrupted, gone. The tapes were still warm, still spinning, but completely blank. Now ask yourself, what could blank analog tape with no electromagnetic burst? Unless something wanted to remove evidence. Not cause a malfunction, just take what it needed. One last oddity. Some hikers claim to see people ahead of them, silhouettes moving in the fog, always just out of reach. When they follow, they find boot prints identical to their own. Looping, replaying. You finally make it to the edge of the field, the mossy border where lava yields to grass. You take one last look back. The fog doesn't follow you. It waits, and so does whatever stands quietly in that ancient silence, whispering to the stones while no one listens. You take your next step and realize it's not yours. Your foot lands just an inch off from where you meant it to. Not enough to trip, just enough to notice. You pause, confused. Is this still you? Or did something else just try to steer? You're not alone in that feeling, because tonight we close with some of the strangest tales of all. The watchers, the moments, the places that feel as if the universe is tilting its head slightly, paying attention, and not for your benefit. One of the most unsettling patterns across the 29 mysteries we've wandered through tonight is this shared sensation, being watched. Whether it's the man in black at your door after a UFO sighting, or the voice that whispers, "Turn left," just before a disaster strikes, the presence is always the same. Silent, aware, recording. Take the infamous Hat Man. Countless people across continents report the exact same hallucination, if you want to call it that, during sleep paralysis. A tall silhouette in a wide-brimmed hat, no face, no motion, just the weight of his gaze. He doesn't speak, he doesn't touch, but you feel him, as if your soul is being scanned. And here's the truly eerie part. He's not culturally specific. He shows up in Japan, Brazil, Poland, South Africa. People who've never spoken the same language describe him identically. Historians still argue whether this is an archetype rooted in ancient folklore or a modern psychological phenomenon. But when hundreds of thousands of strangers see the same thing in their most vulnerable moments, well, you start to wonder what the odds really are. Not all watchers are so passive. In 1981, in a sleepy British town, police investigated strange break-ins, but nothing was ever taken. No damage, no fingerprints. The only commonality? Residents claimed to see floating lights, faceless silhouettes, and one even swore the same dream figure visited them 5 nights in a row. Some said it felt like an experiment, as if someone or something was taking notes. And then there's the stranger idea still, that maybe these watchers aren't watching us. Maybe they're watching through us. Think about that for a second. The idea that you're not the subject of the observation, but the lens. That the odd dreams you've had, the familiar strangers you pass on the street, the static in your ears late at night, those aren't glitches. They're artifacts. Interference from something looking through your eyes at something else. Now let's swing to something less shadowy, if only slightly. You've heard of guardian presences, right? People who claim a mysterious stranger saved them at the last second, from a car crash, a drowning, a fall, often faceless, sometimes glowing. They vanish once the danger passes. A hiker once swore a tall figure whispered, "Wait 5 more seconds." She did. A massive tree crashed in front of her on the path. A sailor, lost at sea, followed the light of what he thought was a rescue boat. There was no boat, just a glowing sphere, hovering until morning. Then it blinked out like a candle. So what are they? Aliens? Angels? Artificial intelligence running background scans on a simulation gone sideways? Fringe thinkers believe watchers are interdimensional researchers. Not malicious, not kind, just curious. Others say they're echoes, residual consciousnesses from other timelines, other versions of us bleeding through. Now here's your quirky fact to chew on before bed. In 2020, a telescope in Antarctica picked up neutrino particles behaving unlike any before, moving upward against the Earth's gravitational pull. Some physicists speculated they originated in a parallel universe, moving in reverse time. What if our watchers come from there? What if they're not even alive by our standards? And what if sometimes you're one of them? You blink. You're still in your room, still tucked in, but part of you still remembers the moss-covered stones of Iceland, the man with no eyes at the bus stop, the unmoving plane in the sky. You remember the pause, and here comes that final, quiet ripple. the one you don't talk about. That time you stood in front of a mirror and your reflection blinked a second too late. You laugh it off, but you still think about it. And maybe tonight, when you turn out the light, you'll look just a little longer. Because if they are watching, they already know. And now you rest. The stories have slowed. The shadows have softened. The voices, those echoes of ancient legends, lost towns, flickering lights, have faded into the stillness of your room. Whatever mysteries stirred tonight, they can wait. You've wandered far enough for one evening. Let your body sink gently into the mattress, the weight of the world slipping away. Picture the moss-covered statues, half swallowed by jungle vines, the mist drifting over forgotten islands, the starless skies that blinked once, then vanished. You stood at the edge of the unknown and leaned in, not with fear, but with wonder. There's a peace in that, a quiet awe that hums behind your thoughts like a lullaby sung by the cosmos. The watchers, the wanderers, the ancient minds that drift between moments, they're quiet now, not gone, but at rest, just like you. Your breathing steadies. The fan hums softly, like static from a universe just out of reach. Somewhere the timeline realigns. The path you've walked folds gently behind you, like pages closing in a storybook meant only for the brave. And as sleep takes hold, slowly, warmly, you realize the questions matter more than the answers. Because it's not about solving the mystery. It's about carrying it with you, letting it change you, letting it remind you that there's always more to see, more to feel, more to question. So drift now. The dark is calm. The watchers are gone. The lights are low. And in the space between moments, a soft whisper lingers. You've seen too much to forget, but you've earned your rest. Let sleep fold over you like a heavy velvet curtain. Let the questions wait for another night. The mystery will still be here, watching, waiting, listening.